Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and quite a few people have asked me since Jerry Ward did his video the other day discussing underground labs versus pharmaceutical grade gear, and people have asked me do I agree with him. Given that both of us are older school guys, we've been in the gear scene longer than a decade, so we remember what things were like back when Dorian Yates actually was an IFBB pro as far as in the drug ranks. And so people would say things like, oh, it was what Dorian claimed he used his actual gear doses. Is it even possible? Yeah, I think it is possible, because guys like Jerry and I have used the older legit pharma stuff, and there is a dramatic difference between that and the underground labs today. And I'm going to catch flack for this because I have friends who are dealers. I have friends who deal underground lab gear. I'm connected with a lot of the guys who are higher up the chains and distributing these things. I know these people, at least here in the UK right now. And the reality is, it is not competitive with legit pharma stuff. And I'm not saying there aren't fake pharma out there, but anyone who has used the older stuff and then used a lot of these underground labs today, there's a dramatic difference. And that is one of the reasons you do see people claiming these ultra high doses and not getting the results you would think. And then going back to the topic of IFBB pros, well, yeah, if the IFBB pros are getting legitimately dosed stuff, they would be using the equivalent of 6, 7, 8, 10 grams of what a lot of you guys out there are using. And here's some examples I'll give you. I know a couple of guys who have accesses to labs due to either their work or their current studies at university. They have direct access to lab equipment to test this stuff. And these are some of the numbers I have heard come back on underground lab stuff that's been tested. I've heard of testosterone coming back as having only 17 or 18 milligrams per milliliter in the bottle instead of 250, which was on the label. A lot of it is around quarter dose, a lot of it's half dosed. I've heard of equipoise coming back as low dose testosterone. If it said 200 equipoise on it, it actually turned out to be 50 milligrams a test. I've heard of primobolan coming back as equipoise or quarter dose test. So that 100 milligrams per milliliter of primobolan actually turned out to be 50% of that is equipoise, or like 20 milligrams of testosterone. Because the lower side effects, the less bloating, people think it's really primobolan. A lot of the trenbolone acetate, I've heard of. I know one guy who has tested this stuff. He's tested different labs, and he said over half of them have come back as this 100 milligram per milliliter trend turns out to be 50 milligram per milliliter Winstrol. So at least half of the trend that's circulating out there that you guys are using is Winstrol, not trenbolone. Most of the Anavar out there, when guys have tested it, turns out to be Winstrol. I've had guys go, and I know someone who's tested some of these really high-dosed nandrolones out there that are supposedly 300, 400 milligrams per milliliter. They turn out to be 50 milligrams per milliliter. So the reality is, Jerry is definitely right, and there's sometimes you'll run across stuff that is legitimately dosed, but it's oftentimes the people brewing it got lucky and they got legitimately dosed powders. It does come back to that point of you're just assuming that what you get from the guy in China is legitimate. And that's the chemists who are making it, because they're not always true chemists. They're not testing this stuff. They don't have access to the equipment. They're making it in their kitchen. For those of you who've seen Breaking Bad, a lot of these guys are not Walter White. They're Jesse. And notice that even in the show, all the meth heads thought Jesse's stuff was pretty good. Well, it's the same thing with the underground labs. It's regular gym-going guys who figure out how to do the basic chemistry and mix the stuff together, and they're assuming their materials they're getting from China are good. Oftentimes they're not. And you have no way to ensure the sterility of these things sometimes other than just increasing the alcohol content to the point to where there's health issues related from the solvents and the alcohols, even if there's no infection. So at the end of the day, Jerry is right, and I would say to you guys that if you can afford pharma, if you're going to use stuff, don't use underground lab stuff if you have an alternative. So is it very well possible that someone like Dorian Yates was really only using 2,000 or 2,500 milligrams of gear per week along with his HGH and insulin? Yeah, absolutely. And anyone who's ever used 2 grams of legit gear would know that that is probably possible with someone with the right genetics and training ethic. Alright guys, so that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it has been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time. But let me give you guys a bicep shot before I go.